The first flakes of snow had fallen over Ponyville, blanketing its colourful cottages in soft white powder. Hearth-warming decorations adorned every street, strings of fairy lights, wreaths on doors, ornaments of all shapes and sizes. Sugarcube Corner was no exception. Its gingerbread-like facade practically glowed with festive charm. Inside, Pinkie Pie was a whirlwind of holiday cheer. She zipped back and forth, hanging garlands and arranging desserts with her usual exuberance. But this year, the centerpiece of her display was something special that she had brought back from her latest adventure.
Ta-da!
Pinkie held up a sprig of glittering mistletoe. Its larger-than-average silver-tinged leaves shimmered as if dusted with frost, and its crimson berries seemed to glow softly.
Straight from the snowy tundra of Equestria. Isn't it just perfect? And so sturdy. I carried it all the way home in my saddlebags, and it's completely intact for me to use it as decoration over the counter.
Twilight tilted her head, examining the sprig her friend held. It's unique. Are you sure it's safe to use? Equestria flora can be pretty magical, and not always in a good way. Pinkie waved a hoof dismissively.
Oh, it's fine. The Yak said it doesn't bother them at all. It grows all around their houses at this time of year. Plus, I carried a ton of it back and I'm fine. And look how cute it is. It's like Hearthwing spirit in plant form. So much prettier than the plain old mistletoe we grow in Equestria.
Twilight was still wary, but had to admit that Pinkie was right. It was indeed pretty, and mistletoe was a staple of Hearth's-warming Eve traditions. And Pinkie was indeed fine. She had been back for a week and suffered no ill effects from her close contact with the plant.
And I brought enough to decorate your castle for the Hearthwing party!
Pinkie gestured at the bulging saddlebag that Twilight had come to collect so that she could get started decorating.
It's so super special awesome of you to hold it in your castle this year, Twilight!
Twilight smiled. Well, with all that room, it makes sense to hold it there instead of squashing every pony into Applejack's barn. Warmer, too. No matter how securely they rebuild that thing, the walls always let in cold air.
Oh, I don't think it's all that bad.
Pinkie winked at her.
A little shivering is a good reason to snuggle up to some pony special. Especially if that some pony happens to be under a sprig of mistletoe.
She puckered her lips, making kissy noises that had Twilight rolling her eyes good-naturedly.
Oh, come on! Isn't there any pony you'd like to snuggle up with?
Twilight bit her lip. No. Pinkie's eyes widened.
I knew it! Who is it? Come on! Tell me! Tell me!
Oh, hey, look at the time. Twilight scooped up the sack of decorations and the saddlebag of mistletoe in her magical field. I really have to get going. You'll be open to customers soon, and you won't need me getting in the way. Pinkie stuck out her tongue.
Spoil sport.
The new mistletoe was hung with great pride above the cafe's counter. When he saw it, Mr. Cake promptly pulled his wife into a hug and kissed her soundly, making her blush and goggle like a mare half her age. As the day went on, ponies passing through could not resist stopping to admire the enormous sprig, some even kissing their own special sun ponies underneath it. Pinkie's enthusiasm for all things hearth-warming was infectious, and soon the entire town was abuzz with excitement for the hearth-warming party that she and Twilight were planning. Yet, by the end of the week, ponies began to whisper of strange happenings. Mrs. Cake was the first to fall ill, her normally cheerful demeanour replaced by a pallid complexion and laboured breathing. Her husband soon followed, leaving Pinkie Pie to take care of the twins on her own. Then it was Bonbon, who collapsed in the middle of her candy shop floor, coughing up phlegm that looked like it was dusted with frost. Then Lyra Heartstrings fainted in the middle of the town square while galloping to the hospital to see her sick wife. By the time a dozen ponies had been hospitalized, the connection was clear. Every single one of them had visited Sugarcube Corner and kissed some pony under the mistletoe. and each of the houses where the infected lived had sprouted fresh mistletoe with glowing red berries above their doors. Twilight paced the floor of her study, hooves clinking against the crystalline floor. Scrolls and books were strewn across her desk, open to pages detailing magical fungi, parasitic plants, and arcane remedies. Spike hovered nearby, scribbling notes as Twilight muttered, half to him, half to herself. In the corner, surrounded by her own pile of books, Starlight Glimmer snored, having fallen asleep after pulling an all-nighter, trying to find out more about the Yakyakistani mistletoe variant. Passage to Yakyakistan to ask Prince Rutherford for more information was impossible now that the route was cut off by the yearly blizzards, and all the Yak students of the School of Friendship had long since gone home to evade that yearly event. Spike had tried sending letters, until Twilight pointed out that the Yaks had no way of replying with the roads blocked. They were on their own. Magical spores, symbiotic growth patterns, resistance to healing magic. The sprig from Sugarcube Corner didn't burn when Pinkie tried that. Ugh! Twilight groaned and rubbed her temples. Nothing matches. The mistletoe doesn't behave like any plant I've read about. If I didn't know better, I'd say it's almost malicious.
We can ask Princess Celestia for help,
Spike suggested cautiously. I already sent her a letter. She's consulting with the royal botanists. But even if they find something, it might take too long to synthesize an antidote, and getting here to Ponyville, we're running out of time. Who knows what this infection could do if left unchecked? Twilight glanced at the map of Ponyville pinned to the wall. Red dots marked infected homes. The illness was spreading fast. There was no telling how far it may spread, or what the end stages might be. If ponies who had visited Sugarcube Corner went home and infected other ponies there, who then went on to infect other ponies, who then... Twilight shook her head to dislodge the thought spiral. There was nothing else for it. Safety precautions had to be taken. I'm going to put a shield spell around Ponyville, like my brother did around Canterlot before his wedding, so the infection can't get out. Until we find out a way to remedy it, the entire town is on lockdown.
But Twilight...
No, Spike. I don't often do it, but I'm putting my hoof down as a princess of Equestria. Ponyville is officially under quarantine. Send a letter to Mayor Mare letting her know of my decision.
Okay, but she won't be happy about it. A lot of ponies head out of town for Heartswarming Eve, and they'll be trapped inside the shield spell.
She'll be even less happy if this illness gets out of town with them. Twilight headed up to the tallest tower in her castle, summoned all the power she could, and let a pink bubble billow outward from her horn until it encased all of Ponyville. It used to take all her strength to cast this spell, but since becoming an alicorn, it required only a fraction of her power to cast and maintain. Satisfied that there were no gaps in her shield, she headed back to her study. Just as she arrived, however, the window slammed open and Rainbow Dash flew in, her mane windblown and her face grim.
Twilight!
Starlight Glimmer startled awake, and Spike let out a surprised plume of green fire.
Sweet Apple Acres! Help! It's bad.
Rainbow Dash, take a breath! Twilight's heart sank. None of her friends had fallen ill yet. Was that about to change? What happened? Rainbow Dash took several deep breaths and pointed back out the window with one hoof.
Big Mac's infected. He collapsed in the field this morning. He's been looking worse by the minute since they got him home. Sugar Bell's sick too. But worse and faster. Applejack says they need you. She doesn't know what to do since it's all happened so fast. They were both fine this morning.
Twilight's wings drooped. Okay. She steeled herself. She might not have had any miraculous breakthroughs in her search for a cure, but Applejack needed her. Twilight knew how hard it was for Applejack to ask any pony for help. That she had done so now was testament to how desperate she was. Twilight could not let her down. Spike, keep working on the antidote research with Starlight. Rainbow, get Fluttershy and Rarity to help set up a quarantine zone around Sweet Apple Acres to keep rubberneckers away. I'll go help Applejack. Yet, as she followed Dash out of the window, Twilight hesitated. The air outside was heavy with a strange, sweet aroma, like burnt sugar and overripe berries. She shook her head and hurried to catch up with Dash, heart pounding. Applejack needed her. She could not fail. She could not be late. She had to help her friend. Snowflakes swirled lazily in the breeze of their passing. But something else drifted with them, almost invisible and unnoticed in the two ponies' haste to go and help their friend. Tiny, glimmering specks, like frost dust on the breeze. At Sweet Apple Acres, the scene was grim. Rows of apple trees stood bare of fruit or leaves, their branches weighed down instead by clusters of mistletoe that had seemingly sprung up overnight. Twilight gaped. This was not the few sprigs over doorways like in town. The farmhouse windows were shuttered, and a crude quarantine sign had been nailed to the front door. Ponies milled about in the lane, seemingly drawn by morbid curiosity.
I'll take care of the unwanted spectators,
Dash growled.
You go help Applejack, Twi.
She changed course and all but dive-bombed the onlookers.
Don't you know that stuff is dangerous? Don't get too close to it, you idiots.
Applejack greeted Twilight at the farmhouse door, her hat pulled low and her face lined with exhaustion.
Thanks for coming, Twi. I hate to ask, but I'm worried we're losing Sugarbelle. She's deteriorating so dang fast, and
she dropped her voice to a low whisper.
Something is growing out of her horn and her mouth.
Twilight's stomach churned, but she forced herself to nod. I'll do what I can for her.
Thank you, Twilight. You're the best.
Twilight tried to ignore the little fizzle of pleasure inside her at those words. Now was not the time for thoughts like that. As she had done so many times before, she pushed them aside and focused instead on the task at hoof. Inside the farmhouse, the air was stifling. The same sweet, cloying smell was stronger here, mingling with the faint coppery tang of blood. Big Mac lay on a makeshift cot in the living room, barrel chest heaving. Applejack was strong, but evidently she had not been able to lift him up the stairs. Sugarbelle was in the bedroom she usually shared with him, gasping amid sweat-drenched sheets. Green tendrils coiled from her mouth and nostrils, their tips blooming into tiny clusters of glowing red berries. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, meeting Twilight's with a look of silent pleading. At the tip of her horn, white petals had unfurled. Twilight lit her own horn, scanning Sugarbelle's body with a diagnostic spell. The results made her chest tighten with alarm. The mistletoe wasn't just growing. It was merging with the unicorn's flesh, feeding off her life force, and especially her magic. Applejack, Twilight began, but a sudden cry from outside cut her off. She turned and looked out the window just in time to see Rainbow Dash dart away from one of the pony onlookers in the lane. The stallion collapsed, body convulsing. Dash flew into the sky, hiding behind a cloud. As she, Twilight, and Applejack watched in horror, the stallion's midsection swelled grotesquely, skin writhing like it was full of snakes. Then his belly and chest burst open, coils of mistletoe exploding outward in a spray of vines, blood, and viscera. The other ponies around him screamed and fled, but Twilight knew it was already too late for them. A huge burst of sparkling dust had also erupted from the dead pony, along with the vines. Spores. By the time Twilight returned to her castle, night had fallen. Ponyville was no longer the cheerful town she loved. The streets were deserted, except for the faint movements of infected ponies stumbling aimlessly, vines and berries sprouting from their bodies like monstrous hearth-warming decorations. Every window was secured, every door locked tight. The only light came from her shield overhead, and the mistletoe itself, red berries glowing faintly. Glittering spores coated everything. Twilight maintained the magical shield with which she had coated her entire body, dashing into the castle and slamming the doors shut behind her. She leaned against them, trembling. Spike ran up, eyes wide with worry.
Twilight, are you okay?
He already knew everything she did, thanks to her missive teleported to him from Sweet Apple Acres.
How are Sugarbell and Big Mac?
I'm fine, she lied. And they're both alive. But it's worse than I thought. The mistletoe's spreading faster than we can contain it. Even if I can't find a cure, I need to work on a counterspell to hold it back before it infects and kills everyone in Ponyville. There's no time to lose. Her friends were gathered in the map room, faces grim. Pinkie Pie sat in the corner, uncharacteristically silent. Rarity paced anxiously, while Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash whispered quietly to each other. Starlight stared fixedly at a teacup for some reason Twilight could not fathom. They all looked up at her entrance. Any progress? Rarity shook her head.
We've done everything we can to warn ponies to stay indoors, but I don't think it's enough. There's too much panic and too many are already infected. And the mistletoe is spreading faster than I would have thought possible had I not seen it for myself.
She took a steadying breath.
I'm so grateful my family were already in Manhattan visiting relatives for the holidays. I've told them not to come home until they get word that it's safe. They're worried about me, but... well...
Cloudsdale isn't infected.
Rainbow Dash added after Rarity trailed off.
They've created a protective cloud layer to keep the spores out, though.
That's good.
But what if some of the spores got into the rain clouds?
Fluttershy asked.
Won't they be transported all over Equestria?
Not if I can make a counterspell to neutralize them. Now that I know that's how the infection is spreading, I have a basis to work from. At least my shield spell over the town is holding. It will keep the spores from getting further than the borders of Ponyville. Fluttershy's voice was barely audible.
Twilight, what happens if we can't stop it? What if it's already out there?
Twilight did not answer at first. She did not need to. The dire truth was written all over her face. I'll find a way, she said finally. I have to. You all stay in here where it's safe. I'm hermetically sealing the room so no spores can get in. Don't let anyone aside from me in or out until I tell you it's safe. Her friends nodded, though the tension in the room was palpable. Twilight retreated to her study. It felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Hours passed as Twilight pored over botany texts and magical formulas, Quill scratching furiously. Her study was silent, except for the occasional crackle of the fireplace and the buzz of her horn. The clock ticked ominously, each second reminding her how little time she had to fix this problem. A knock on the study door startled her. She had specifically told her friends not to leave the map room.
Come in,
She called without looking up. It was probably Spike. She had not eaten or drunk anything in a long while, and his desire to help her sometimes outweighed his desire to follow instructions. He was her number one assistant for a reason, after all. The study door creaked open. Instead of dragon claws, she heard hoofsteps behind her. Twilight turned and blinked in surprise.
Applejack, what are you doing here? I thought you were staying at Sweet Apple Acres with your family.
Applejack stood in the doorway, her hat clutched in her hooves. Her mane was disheveled, and her eyes shimmered with something Twilight could not quite place. Desperation? Sorrow? Guilt?
I needed to see you.
Applejack's voice was tremulous. She swallowed.
Big Mac.
Twilight's ribcage changed into a bear trap around her lungs.
Oh no. Is he?
Applejack squeezed her eyes shut and nodded.
Sugarbell too. Just like that Stallion in the lane.
Sweet Celestia. Applejack, I'm so sorry.
Twilight frowned.
You were in the room with them? Applejack, you shouldn't have.
I know. My nephew got away from me and ran to see his parents. I chased him, but I didn't get him out in time.
She took a step closer, voice trembling.
Twilight, I need to say something. I might not get another chance.
Twilight's blood turned to ice. Not another chance?
I've been thinking about this for a long time. Seeing Big Mac and Sugarbell at the end like that, I can't keep it in anymore. Twilight Sparkle, I'm in love with you.
The words hung in the air, heavy and bittersweet. Twilight's eyes widened, mind racing. She had hoped in her most secret heart of hearts, but had never thought, had never wanted to risk their friendship by even entertaining the idea. Before she could respond, Applejack closed the distance between them and kissed her. It happened so fast that Twilight's mind short-circuited. For a moment, all she could feel was the warmth of Applejack's lips, the feel of Applejack's hoof against her cheek, the sight of Applejack's green eyes closing to savor the kiss was all her universe comprised of. For one sweet, shining moment, Twilight Sparkle lost herself in the press of the other mare's mouth, in the what could have beens. But then a strange, tingling sensation curled through her mouth, like a dozen tiny cold tongues unfurling against her teeth and palate. One even reached down her throat, and Twilight broke the kiss to pull back, coughing violently.
Applejack! What?
That was when she saw it. Tiny green tendrils were already beginning to sprout from Applejack's lips and nostrils. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her breathing was labored. Now that she had stepped into the illumination of the firelight, Twilight could see that Applejack's whole body was covered in dried blood and glittering spores.
Sorry.
Applejack choked out, tears streaming down her face.
Sorry. It's too late. It's too late for all of us. We're already dead, Twilight. There ain't no cure that'll save us. So, I had to see you one last time. I couldn't die without telling you that
Applejack's body convulsed. She collapsed onto her side with a terrible groan. Blood that looked like it was dusted with frost seeped from her nose and tear ducts.
Applejack!
Vines erupted from the Earth Pony's chest and stomach, wrapping around her like a blood-soaked cocoon. Twilight screamed as she was thrown back, shielding herself with a magical barrier. Leaves, white petals, and glowing red berries butted up against her shield, as if trying to pry it away to get at her. Applejack's wide, staring, unseeing eyes disappeared from view. When the chaos subsided, all that was left was a tangled mass of gore-spattered mistletoe, berries glowing faintly in the dimness of Twilight's study. Twilight staggered to her hooves.
Applejack. No. No.
Molding her barrier spell around her body, she rushed to the mirror over the fireplace and opened her mouth. Down her throat, she could already see tiny vines coiling around the back of her tongue, their tips blooming into minuscule red berries. The mistletoe worked faster on ponies with magic, and she had more magic inside her than anyone else in Ponyville. Panic surged through Twilight. She had spent days trying to find a cure or a counterspell, but now it was too late. The spores were inside her, feasting on her flesh, becoming one with her body, supercharged by her magical life force. And after seeing what had happened to Applejack, she knew what would come next. Twilight sank to the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. She thought of her friends waiting in the map room. She thought of Applejack's final words and the look in her eyes before the end. Applejack had known, had accepted that it was already too late. And she was right. Twilight's chest tightened. It had been too late from the moment Pinkie Pie brought that damned mistletoe back to Ponyville with her. Of course, it did not affect yaks negatively. They did not have nearly enough magic in them to trigger its worst effects. Ponies, however. Quickly, Twilight fetched a sheaf of parchment and began to write. Hearth's warming eve dawned cold and still. The castle of friendship stood silent, completely shrouded in vines. Mistletoe hung from every corner, crimson berries glowing like macabre holiday lights. In the map room, 6 cocoons lay where 5 ponies and 1 baby dragon had fallen. The map table was spattered with so much red, it looked like it had been decorated too. In Princess Twilight Sparkle's study, the fire had begun to burn out. A letter lay on the table. Dear Princess Celestia, by the time you read this, It may already be too late for me. The spores have taken hold, and I know what's coming. I've watched it happen. I'm not afraid to die, but I am afraid of what will happen if this infection spreads beyond Ponyville. Unless you have found a cure for the infection, it is too late for this town and the ponies in it. The mistletoe spores are unlike anything we've ever faced. They thrive on warmth and magic, feeding on the very essence of life of whatever they manage to penetrate. The more magical a host, the faster they work. They don't stop. They don't relent. And they've already claimed so many. Even now, as I write this, I can feel them growing inside me. I don't have much time, so I must be brief, Princess. I have placed a protective shield around the town, holding back the infected vines and spores as best I can. But the spell is tied to my magic. When I die, it will fail. When that happens, there will be nothing to stop the spores from escaping into the winds and spreading across Equestria. I will hold on as long as I can, but I don't know how long that will be. You must act swiftly, Princess. Come to Ponyville. Wait outside my shield. When it drops, I beg of you, use your magic to destroy Ponyville. Leave no trace of the town, the castle, or the mistletoe. Annihilate it all and salt the ground. The lives of so many depend on containing this infection here, no matter the cost. I know what I'm asking of you. Ponyville has always been a place of love, friendship, and hope. It's where I've grown, where I've laughed, and where I've lived some of the happiest days of my life. And I think I might have found more here, had things been different. But if destroying it means saving the rest of Equestria, then I gladly accept that fate. I'm sorry that I couldn't save my friends. Please commemorate them. They didn't ask for this, but they'll pay the price for it along with the rest of the town. I'm not able to ask them, but I'm sure they would agree with my request of you. Thank you, Princess, for everything, for trusting me, for guiding me, and for teaching me what it means to be a leader. I hope that in my death, I can do one last bit of good in this world. Please, Princess, don't hesitate. Come as soon as you can. The moment my magic fades and Ponyville is revealed, you must act with precision, speed, and lethal force. Promise me that you will. Your faithful student eternally, Twilight Sparkle. Beside the desk lay a tangle of vines studded with mistletoe. Twilight had tried until the end to do the right thing. She had fought with every atom of her being. But it had not been enough. The mistletoe had taken too much of her by the time she tried to send the letter. White petals bloomed from the tip of her softly glowing horn, snuffing out the last of her alicorn magic. Outside, the shield around Ponyville flickered and died. The wind howled, carrying tiny silver spores that looked like dustings of frost, far beyond Ponyville, across the empty sky. Hearth's warming eve would never be the same ever again.